Robert Taylor was declared the fastest in the Western world with his 0.18-second surgical draw that had become legend throughout MGM Studios. Hollywood's most perfect profile demonstrated speed that looked like medical precision performed by a master surgeon. Then Steve McQueen stepped from the shadows of the Western set, touched his holster with deadly intent, and proved that survival instinct is faster than any technique ever developed in acting studios. The afternoon silence suddenly felt heavier than the studio lights overhead. If you respect the real Steve McQueen, subscribe to Steve McQueen Untold Legacy. November 1961. Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer Studios, Lot 3. Where the most elaborate Western town set in Hollywood stretched across 3 acres of carefully constructed frontier atmosphere. Wooden boardwalks aged by studio craftsmen, hitching posts positioned for optimal camera angles, and buildings designed to look authentic from every possible direction. The air carried the scent of sawdust, mixed with strong coffee that fueled long production days, and the kind of concentrated effort that separated major studio productions from independent efforts. Studio lights created harsh shadows that would have been impossible in actual frontier towns, but served the needs of cinematographers who understood that dramatic lighting mattered more than historical accuracy when creating images that would captivate audiences worldwide. This was neutral territory, where different generations of Hollywood talent could meet and test their respective approaches to screen authenticity without the diplomatic constraints of active production schedules. Robert Taylor, 50 years old, stood in the center of the dusty street like a figure from classical sculpture placed in frontier setting by artists who understood the power of perfect proportions. MGM's most distinguished leading man, possessing the kind of flawless features that had made him famous across multiple decades and genres. His Western costume looked like it had been designed by experts who understood both historical accuracy and the requirements of modern cinematography. Authentic enough to convince audiences, elegant enough to complement his classical good looks. Taylor's approach to quick-draw demonstrations reflected his background in classical Hollywood training, where every movement was choreographed for maximum visual impact and technical perfection. Years of working with the industry's best technical advisors had given him capabilities that most actors never attempted to develop, understanding that authentic screen presence required authentic skills rather than clever camera work and editing tricks. His reputation for precision had become legendary within the industry. Directors knew they could count on Robert Taylor to deliver exactly what was required, when it was required, with technical excellence that eliminated the need for multiple takes or complicated workarounds. Professional reliability that had made him one of MGM's most valuable assets across nearly 3 decades of major productions. Steve McQueen, 31 years old, watched from the edge of the set with the restless attention that characterized his approach to everything involving skill, competition, or the relationship between traditional methods and innovative alternatives. Fresh from television success that had established him as a rising talent, he was at MGM exploring possibilities for transitioning to major studio films while maintaining the authentic edge that had made him distinctive in a business filled with manufactured personalities. McQueen understood that he was observing more than a technical demonstration. Taylor represented the pinnacle of classical Hollywood craftsmanship, the kind of polished professionalism that had defined the industry's golden age and continued to set standards that younger performers were expected to match or exceed. But McQueen's background had given him different perspectives on what authentic toughness looked like when it served purposes beyond entertainment. The afternoon session had drawn a small audience of technical advisors, stunt coordinators, and executives who understood that witnessing Robert Taylor demonstrate his legendary quick-draw technique was both privilege and education. His capabilities had become part of MGM folklore, discussed in production meetings, and used as examples when other actors needed motivation to improve their own professional skills. "Gentlemen," Taylor announced to his assembled observers, his voice carrying the classical projection that had made him equally effective in intimate dramas and epic productions. "Speed without precision is merely violence. Precision without speed is merely performance. The goal is synthesis that serves both dramatic requirements and authentic characterization. He positioned himself facing a target positioned 40 feet away, stance that somehow managed to look both technically perfect and naturally elegant. Weight distributed with mathematical precision, hand positioned for optimal mechanical advantage. Everything calculated to produce maximum speed while maintaining absolute control over accuracy and safety. Observe the mechanics, but understand that mechanics serve larger purposes. This isn't merely about drawing quickly, it's about creating believable characters who can handle whatever situation scripts demand while looking like men, rather than actors pretending to be men. Taylor drew his weapon. What happened next represented the culmination of decades spent perfecting techniques that most people couldn't achieve through years of dedicated practice. His hand moved with clockwork precision, each element of the draw executed with surgical accuracy that eliminated wasted motion while maximizing efficiency. The gun appeared at full extension with mathematical inevitability, fired with perfect accuracy, and returned to leather with the same controlled elegance that had characterized every aspect of the demonstration. The chronometer displayed 0.18 seconds. Complete silence settled over the assembled observers as they processed what they'd witnessed. This wasn't just fast. This was human capability refined to theoretical perfection through systematic training and natural talent applied with absolute discipline. Technical mastery that served artistic purposes while demonstrating genuine skill rather than cinematic illusion. "Magnificent," whispered one of the technical advisors, a man who'd worked with every major star MGM had produced over the previous 2 decades. Taylor reholstered with the same controlled precision he'd shown throughout the demonstration, movements that somehow made extraordinary achievement look like natural expression of superior breeding and classical training. "Speed is mathematics, gentlemen. Every muscle must know exactly where to be at precisely the right moment. Hesitation is the enemy of both efficiency and authenticity." He turned toward McQueen with the confident smile of someone who'd just proven a point that had never been in serious dispute. "Steve, your thoughts on classical technique applied to Western characterization?" McQueen stepped from shadow into harsh studio lighting, his movement creating subtle shift in atmosphere that suggested something was about to change in ways that technical perfection might not adequately address. Where Taylor's presence filled space with classical authority, McQueen's presence created tension through intensity that made people pay attention without conscious decision. "Impressive demonstration, Robert. Really impressive. Thank you. Years of disciplined practice with the industry's finest technical advisors. The goal is achieving capabilities that serve character development rather than merely looking good for cameras. That's an interesting approach. Professional approach. Western films require authentic capabilities from actors who claim to represent tough characters. Audiences can sense the difference between genuine skill and choreographed approximation." McQueen nodded with understanding, but his expression suggested that he was considering variables that classical training might not adequately address. "Robert, can I ask you something about technique?" "Certainly. When you draw at that speed, what are you thinking about?" Taylor considered the question with the thoughtfulness he applied to all aspects of character development. "I'm thinking about mechanical execution, eliminating variables that could introduce error or delay, achieving perfect synthesis between speed and control. Technical perfection, exactly. The goal is capability that looks natural, while serving dramatic requirements that audiences might not consciously recognize but definitely respond to emotionally. That's fascinating." "How so?" "Because when I think about drawing a weapon, I'm not thinking about technique at all." The distinction hung in the air like gun smoke, revealing fundamental differences in philosophy that went beyond quick-draw methods to examine the relationship between classical training and practical application. Taylor was describing artistic process designed to serve cinematic purposes. McQueen was describing something else entirely. "What are you thinking about, Steve?" "Eliminating whoever's trying to eliminate me, as quickly and completely as possible." Different mental approach to the same physical challenge? Different purpose for the same physical tools. Taylor studied McQueen with professional interest that mixed curiosity with competitive analysis. understanding that the younger actor was describing an approach that prioritized different values than classical Hollywood training typically emphasized. Steve, are you suggesting that survival mindset produces superior results to discipline technique? I'm suggesting that different mindsets produce different kinds of speed for different kinds of situations. Such as situations where looking good while you draw matters less than making sure the other guy never gets a chance to draw at all. McQueen walked closer to the informal firing line, but his preparation looked nothing like Taylor's optimized demonstration setup. No mathematical positioning or calculated stance. Just natural readiness that somehow suggested more immediate danger than all of Taylor's classical perfection. Robert, your speed serves characters who need to demonstrate superior capability through technical mastery. My speed serves characters who need to survive encounters where technique is luxury they can't afford. Both authentic for different dramatic requirements. Both necessary for different kinds of men facing different kinds of problems. Show me, Taylor said, his tone carrying genuine curiosity rather than defensive challenge. But McQueen didn't immediately draw his weapon. Instead, he adjusted his holster with small modifications that prioritized access over appearance, positioning the leather for maximum speed rather than optimal visual symmetry. Everything optimized for function that served purposes cameras couldn't capture. Different equipment setup, Taylor observed. Different priorities. Your holster is positioned for demonstrations. Mine is positioned for situations where demonstrations get people killed. And you think that philosophical difference affects actual performance? I know it does. McQueen's hand moved toward his holster, but instead of drawing, he simply rested his palm against the leather in gesture that looked casual but somehow felt threatening in ways that Taylor's technical perfection had never approached. The simple contact suggested coiled energy that could explode into action without warning or preparation. Robert, watch this. And understand that what you're about to see isn't technique, it's instinct. The atmosphere on the set changed completely. Taylor's demonstration had been impressive entertainment that made people want to applaud technical mastery. McQueen's preparation created tension that made people want to step back from something that looked like it could become genuinely dangerous without regard for observers' safety or comfort. McQueen drew his weapon. What happened next challenged every assumption about the relationship between training and capability, between classical perfection and practical effectiveness. His movement carried none of Taylor's surgical precision or balletic grace. Instead, it exploded from stillness with volcanic intensity that made Taylor's controlled excellence look like elaborate performance art. The draw wasn't smooth. It was inevitable, not elegant, but absolutely final. The gun materialized in McQueen's grip, as if it had been waiting there all along, fired before sound could register, and disappeared back into leather before Taylor's nervous system could process the complete sequence. No chronometer recorded the time because timing had become irrelevant. McQueen had demonstrated something that transcended measurement to reach territory where speed was determined by necessity rather than training, by survival instinct rather than technical refinement. The target showed perfect center mass hit that would have ended any actual confrontation before it could develop into contest of skills or endurance. But the accuracy seemed secondary to the psychological impact of witnessing capability that served purposes entertainment couldn't adequately represent. Taylor stood completely silent, his classical composure replaced by something that looked like professional recognition mixed with genuine concern. Not fear, but understanding that he'd witnessed approach to the same challenge that prioritized different values through completely different methods. Steve, Taylor said slowly, that wasn't faster than my draw. No, it wasn't. But it was something else entirely. How so? My draw demonstrates mastery of technical processes. What you just showed felt like watching technique become irrelevant. McQueen nodded with appreciation for Taylor's analysis. You understand the difference. I understand that we're solving different problems with the same tools. You're not trying to demonstrate superior speed. You're trying to demonstrate superior commitment. Right. Your speed serves characters who need to look competent while handling dangerous situations. My speed serves characters who need to survive dangerous situations regardless of how survival looks. Both authentic for different kinds of storytelling. Both necessary for different definitions of what authentic means. The studio lights continued to create harsh shadows that transformed the Western set into something that looked more like film noir than frontier realism. Both men understanding that their encounter had revealed important differences in their approaches to screen presence and character development. "Robert," McQueen said as he made final adjustments to his holster positioning, "your technique is extraordinary. Really. You've achieved something that represents the absolute peak of classical Hollywood craftsmanship. Thank you. But classical craftsmanship serves different purposes than survival preparation. Such as creating characters who inspire confidence versus creating characters who inspire fear. And you think inspiring fear is more important than inspiring confidence? I think inspiring the right emotion in the right situation is more important than inspiring any particular emotion consistently." As the afternoon light began to fade through the studio's artificial atmosphere, both men understood that they'd examined fundamental questions about authenticity, performance, and the different ways actors could approach the same professional challenges while serving different dramatic purposes. Taylor's classical approach would continue to serve characters who needed to demonstrate competence through superior training and natural authority. McQueen's instinctive approach would serve characters who needed to survive circumstances where training was less important than attitude, and natural authority came from proven capability rather than inherited advantages. Both approaches were necessary for creating the range of Western heroes that audiences expected from major studio productions. Taylor's represented the ideal of what frontier leaders should look like. McQueen's represented the reality of what frontier survival actually required from men whose lives depended on results rather than appearances. The MGM lots slowly emptied as evening approached Los Angeles with golden light that made even artificial Western towns look genuinely historic. Both actors had been changed by the encounter in ways that would influence every future performance. Understanding that authenticity came in different forms that served different purposes for different kinds of stories about different kinds of courage. Robert Taylor was declared the fastest in the Western world with his 0.18-second surgical draw, until Steve McQueen touched his holster and showed him that survival instinct is faster than any technique. Subscribe to Steve McQueen Untold Legacy for stories they never told you.